very, very hot that day. And Richard had backache from riding his camel, and I was feeling thirsty. So we were all walking down the Sand River rather than walking on the exposures looking for bone. And suddenly he let out an exclamation.
Good.
And it was so sudden that I thought he'd seen something, you know, like a lion or a snake or something. And I said, whatever is it? What is it? He said, it's an Australopithecus.
Just like this.
Richard, it can't be.
Yes.
Absolutely complete.
It seemed to look like an Australopithecine, the so-called southern ape, similar to the one Richard's mother had found in 1959, and a possible ancestor.
Maybe it's got...
Just can't be true.
Maybe it's got teeth under there.
Fantastic.
Underneath.
Wonder, yes. Maybe.
Nothing lying about.
No pieces at all.
Where do you think Kamoya is?
They went away in the other direction.
2 hours later, the expedition's deputy leader, Kamoya Kimayu, and Peter Nzube shared the excitement with the Leakeys.
Where went you now?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Complete.
Chưa ra van đi bên đó nè, bên này đi mình nói cái nó là chúng ta cầm miếng sữa.
You're there, That's a mosquito to get timber. To the cotton and the hay.
I love
I love to on it. Can I chili for men?
Yeah. I would do that.
Any more?
Careful.
Yeah. No teeth at all. It's sitting right on the riverbed here. No teeth. Look, there. Teeth are gone.
It was just all too good and all too easy. And the fact that we've been walking down the Sand River when we should have been on the exposure and really shouldn't have found it at all meant, you know, it made it even more seem as if something had pushed us that way.
The expedition's first trophy was indeed an Australopithecine, a southern ape. It was to prove the first in a remarkable series of discoveries. Richard Leakey and his colleagues spent many evenings at their new permanent base camp discussing the skull they'd found. If it had belonged to the maker of the stone tool, the expedition had reached its goal. One night it was put to the critical test.
Well, that thing is just incomprehensible for me as a man. It's so gross.
The skull, now known as number 406, had belonged to a heavy-browed, small-brained creature. In some respects it seemed human, but in others it resembled an ape. American artist Jay Maternes wanted to know where you draw the line.
Not really to be academic about it. What is a man?
At first no one could agree. The archaeologists defined humans according to their habits, while the anatomists distinguished them by their peculiar skeleton.
The first thing as an anatomist that we've got to try and get straight is whether this creature really was fully bipedal with his hands totally free from the business of locomotion. So that's a purely anatomical question.
And there are indications on that skull that in fact it was reasonably erect for quite a lot of the time.
But gentlemen, point sorry we're missing. Because we're talking about man. Most people think of man as you and I are today.
But what about those who lived several millions of years ago? How could one decide which were true humans? The research would be hampered if no one could agree on what they were trying to find.
The importance of being a little more definitive about what you're talking about. I mean, clearly, this wasn't modern man.
Right.
And it doesn't take an anatomist or an archaeologist to tell me.
What Leakey needed was a definition of human. The Shankila Molo, who lived close to the camp, solved his dilemma. Like us, they're modern, and they provide an illustration of what we are without 20th century technology. To observe them is therefore to define the basic qualities of modern humans. Ever since we've been human, we've stood upright, releasing our hand to hold things. We've shared with others. We've talked. We've made tools. The Shankila Molo enabled the archaeologists and anthropologists of the expedition to focus on what humans are. But could this definition be applied to that strange-looking skull, number 406? Could it have talked? Could it have made tools? If so, the expedition had found what it was looking for.
We had a skull, clearly man-like rather than ape-like, but yet it had a small brain and various characteristics that made it different from ourselves. We had found tools in this area, and somebody must have been making them. Probably not this kind of man, an Australopithecus, but another form, a form that hadn't yet been found, but one which perhaps we could find if we kept looking.
Although the ancient skull was not what Richard Leakey had hoped to find, the expedition was by no means a failure. They had now to renew the search for a different kind of skull without knowing what it would be like. In the summer of 1970, they returned. The camels had been replaced by cars. To fetch water was a trek of 100 jolting kilometers to an inland waterhole. This priceless pool was the key to the expedition's survival. With each team member rationed to 5 liters of drinking water a day, the desert wildlife wouldn't suffer. Before the summer of 1969 was out, fragments of a human-like skull were found eroding out of a hill 45 kilometers to the north. In 2 weeks, they sieved 4 tons of earth, but half the skull was never found. Unlike the previous Australopithecine skull, number 406, the new discovery belonged to a more delicate creature, smaller, even graceful. It looked like a completely different animal, a new species. The fragmented skull was first examined at the base camp. Its only name was a number, 732, and as artist J. Maternes made his interpretation of it for a painting of early life at Lake Turkana, he naturally assumed it was a new species.
Jay, you're drawing this thing as a male of a small species. Can you not draw it as a female of the big species? And draw it as a slightly smaller, less muscular version, and see if you can put some female characteristics in it. You remember last year's thing? When you did 406 and put the fur on him? Do it like this, only a female. Try that for a start.
Alan Walker, the anatomist, was suggesting that the new skull was not that of the toolmaker, but merely a female of the large one. After all, huge variations exist today between the male and female gorilla, and there's no reason why these early creatures couldn't also have differed. From the profile of the male, the artist developed a female, a guess at the appearance of one of our indirect ancestors.
And then take all the small limb bones from the Rudolph collection.
To stress his point, Alan Walker had created life-size drawings based on fragments of the skeletons of the two creatures. The little one represents the female, the large one the male.
The large elements. And the fascinating thing about this is that if we put Simon here next to the very big one, the chap with the big chewing muscles and the crests and this enormous skull, then they're the same height. So these robust creatures are only as high as an 11-year-old boy.
That's remarkable.
When Jay made his exquisite interpretation of the Australopithecines, their humanity was hardly apparent. It seemed that they were only a little more advanced than apes. They probably lived in troops, feeding on roots and berries, defending themselves against outsiders. 1 million years ago, they became extinct. No one knows why. Because they probably didn't make tools, they weren't true humans. In 1970, the toolmaker, our direct ancestor, still remained to be found. 1971 passed with no significant finds, and now Richard Leakey found less and less time to do the research he loved. Instead, the work had fallen to his deputy leader, Kamoya, and a remarkable band of men called the Fossil Gang.
Kamoya's team have taken over the exploration. Instead of using camels, they now use the vehicles, but the way of life is extraordinarily similar to that which we used to enjoy with the four-legged transport. The difference is that the food and the petrol, the equipment, all of this is loaded onto the two machines, which have to be coaxed gently across the very broken country. There are no roads here, and with these overladen vehicles, it requires extraordinary skill and cooperation to get this entire caravan across the country. The sand rivers are difficult to cross, but they are useful. You can dig in the sand for water, and the shady trees that grow along the edges are ideal places for camps. From the camps, the team goes out from sunrise until sunset, with a break for lunch, carefully examining every piece of bone that they see. Kamoya, Zube, Bernard Guignot, and the others have extraordinary eyesight. A piece of bone may tell you nothing. It may tell you that it's just a scrap of antelope, a scrap of pig. But sooner or later, you will find something that fully rewards you for the patience and the hours that you spent searching.
On July the 27th, 1972, 3 years to the day after their first great discovery, their efforts to find the toolmaker were rewarded. A member of the Fossil Gang, Bernard and Guignot, was walking along the side of a small hill 30 kilometers inland from the base camp. Bernard was originally hired as the camp cook, but in 1970 he insisted that he wanted to find fossils. He examined a fragment of skull. It could have been anything, an antelope or a pig. But Bernard recognized it as part of a human skull. Then he found another piece.
Kamoya. Kuya, pai ko kisha mtu. Ndio.
Guapa.
Ndio. Eh.
Nafikiri. Okay.
Iko ingine.
Hapa. Nafikiri iko ingine hapa.
Ndio.
Okay, nafikiri wache hii namna hii.
Ndio.
Tuyenge mawe pale alafu Richard nakuyaona.
At the time, Richard Leakey was 600 kilometers away in Nairobi because he was now leading a dual life. During the week, he served as director of the National Museum of Kenya. At the weekend, his suit and tie were exchanged for bush clothes to fly out of the 20th century into the distant past. A rough airstrip had been cleared near the site. Richard flew in, accompanied by Bernard Wood, an anatomist.
What a place to find a bone, huh? Ni hapa?
Yeah.
Hapa. Oh, yes, yes, yes. It's definitely a piece, Bernard.
Yeah.
That's a large piece. Look at that one.
It's a nice piece of the base.
Here's another one.
Can I see that?
Piece, yeah. And these?
It really is a lot. You must be very careful where you're walking here. Well, I think what we've got to do, Mike, is pick up these surface pieces, but before we do that, mark where they are, and then start
The
sitting.
skull was the 1,470th fossil specimen to come from Lake Turkana. Soon, it would be known simply as 1470. Its discovery was undramatic, and no one could have dreamt what it was. Where this hill is, there was once an ancient beach, which would now be scraped and searched. All that anyone knew so far was that a human-type creature had died here. The body had rotted here. It had been dismembered by scavengers here, and the bones scattered around. The task was to find them.
Time and time again.
Well, you said it. That's about how I feel too.
Evie, will you take it on?
Can I really?
That's fine.
Yeah. Delight.
So Meave Leakey, trained originally as a zoologist, undertook the impossible task.
I definitely wouldn't say it was an Australopithecine, but I don't know what it is at all. It's got so many different features to it. I don't imagine him so very different from us, except that he was considerably less intelligent. I would like to think it could talk. What a story it could tell.
It's big, you know, it's definitely not an Australopithecine.
No, chance.
Quite new.
Yes, I think so.
Fantastic.
There's still some maddening pieces here. I'm trying so hard.
Quite different from anything we've had here before. It really is going to make just such a difference to our whole understanding of these things. Do you think you'll get the other side?
Oh, yes, I'm sure. Take time. By Bernard and Richard.
In September 1972, they were visited by another anatomist, Michael Day.
It was one of the most curious skulls that I think I'd ever seen, in the sense that it had a mixture of features, some of which one recognized as being Australopithecine, and some of which one recognized as being related to Homo. In particular, of course, the most impressive thing about it is its large brain size, far ahead of anything which had been called Australopithecine before. If you like, there was an imbalance about the cranium, which made it appear strange and unusual, and of course, on that account, extremely exciting. I think it's one of the most fascinating skulls of all of the ones that have come from East Rudolph, and indeed East Africa in general.
The key now was the skull's age. The geologist Ian Finlater was sent to the discovery site in November to collect samples of ash from above and below the level of the skull. The ash was sent to the Department of Geodesy and Geophysics at Cambridge University to be dated under the guidance of Jack Miller.
Two volcanic ashes, Jack.
Great.
This one comes from this horizon here.
Oh, yes.
And here's the skull site, as you remember.
Yeah.
These two bracketed. They must be dated. They're very important.
Crystals from each of the ash samples were introduced into the maze of channels and tubes that formed the apparatus. When they were subjected to intense heat, the crystals revealed their age. Within their structure, potassium has been changing into argon at a constant rate ever since the crystal was formed. Working out the proportion of the two elements would show how long ago the volcano laid down the ash. At last, the figures emerged. The skull, number 1470, was older than 2.6 million years and younger than 3 million. It was therefore nearly 1 million years older than the oldest previously known skull of a possible human ancestor. In spite of its great age, it had many modern features, particularly its large brain. In front-page news from San Francisco to Norway to Hong Kong, newspapers hailed 1470 as the missing link, the world's oldest human. Richard's celebrated father, Dr. Leakey, said of his work, "Richard has discovered more than I have in 40 years at Olduvai." Most scientists knew this discovery was important, but there were still many questions to answer. One of them was, what did 1470 look like? At the camp, J. Maternes set to work to bring 1470 back to life, to give the bones a sex and a personality. He began with only a skull, then having added the missing jaw, he applied muscles and tissues, finally covering it with a mantle of flesh, skin, and hair. The inspiration for the recreation of 1470 was its apparent capacity for new and intelligent behavior. In Jay's final portrait, 1470 returns to life as a girl of about 20. Her eyes are alert, scanning her surroundings. For a brief second, she has forgotten the daily problems of survival to muse over the birds above a waterhole. The tool she holds in her hand, she made this afternoon. It's a stick she used to dig for the roots she's taking home to share with her mate. Tools and cooperation. She embodies the foundations of humanity. Knowing how she might have looked was only half the story. In 1973, a much larger team was recruited to find out more. The supply of provisions was now a problem. Food for 60 people flown from Nairobi, 600 kilometers away, would have required the full-time use of a large aircraft. Instead, every second day, all available hands at the base camp were summoned to the lake to go fishing.
Let's go and see the fishing now. You want to help? How are you going to help? Are you going to help when the fish come in? Yeah. You have to wait till they've gone all the way around. Which one are you going to help? The big one? That one there? That one there? Or this one? The little one? No, this one.
At last, all the clues were fitting together. 45 kilometers due east of the base camp, in scorching country, they found some stone tools. Unlike the ones Leakey had stumbled on 6 years before, these were in sediment and could be dated. It seemed clear that people had lived on this very spot 1.5 million years ago. It was now the archaeologists' job to sweep away the earth and to piece together the way of life of these early humans from the bones and the stone tools that they left behind. The next discovery seemed to be the remains of a fire. Glyn Isaac came to ask Jack Harris for more news.
Down to the top of it, you can see some nice patches of stone pieces and broken up bone wreck, which again suggests from last year that we're dealing with a campsite situation near the banks of a river, perhaps out a little bit on the floodplain silts.
And what about the evidence, the suggestions we got last year that there might have been fires on the campsite?
We'll have to cut a slice of across it and section it.
Yeah, well, as you know, we can't be too careful about this because if it's confirmed as a trace of a humanly made fire, these are, at 1.5 million years, the oldest known fire anywhere in the world.
Another promising lead. On August the 9th, Richard flew to the same excavation to investigate something even more startling. A man's jaw had just been uncovered on this ancient campsite. They had not so far found human bones and human tools together here. The implications were staggering. Had the human died naturally, or had he been killed?
Look at that canine.
That's the canine, is it? Wow. We had some speculation about which teeth they were. I was across the ridge. First we knew, Jack came panting over the skyline, shouting, "There's a hornet in the excavation!"
Yeah, that's definitely the canine. Just like 1470. It's fantastic. That's a crown, and the top of root is still there. It's a very, very deep mantle in front. Mm-hmm. Rather like 1802, which, as you know, is very, very deep in front and slopes off backwards, which is what we assume to be the sort of hominid that goes with mandible that goes with 1470. This looks almost identical on a very, very superficial.
After the second day, the jaw was removed. It was a disappointment. Not a direct ancestor at all, but the southern ape, Australopithecus. No one will ever know how the remains of this unsuccessful cousin came to be in the campsite of one of our tool-making forebears. However, by 1973, great advances had been made, and the behavior of our ancestor was coming into sharper focus. It was now possible to deduce much more about the 1470 skull, to say how it lived, and even who it lived with. The archaeologists one day brought a cast to one of its ancient campsites to help Jay with the reconstruction. This is detective work. For him to know it was a true human, he must know whether it talked.
Well, if we look at 1470, we can tell from the jaws that the animal had enough room in there for a mobile tongue so he could articulate sounds. And the shape of the base of the skull shows that those sounds would resonate properly. And there's a feature that we can find just inside the brain case here that indicates that probably the central brain control for those movements was there too. So I think there's a very good chance that this creature could speak.
If so, what did it speak about? Possibly about its environment, which Kay Behrensmeyer knows was radically different then.
Going down to the lake, which was in the southwest, maybe a mile or half a mile away, the hominids were camped on the bank of this channel. And if they had stood and looked around them at the time, they would have seen a flat plain with trees and shrubs and grass, much different from what we see here today. It's very dry now. It was much wetter then, I'm sure. And there were lots of different kinds of animals.
Extraordinary animals, like the Civatherium, a giraffe with antlers. In Jay's intriguing panorama of this lost world, man and animals lived in balance. Here, only 20 meters away, humans have settled for a few days to scavenge the carcass of a hippo that has died. They will feed on the meat until only its bones are left. Nearby, there is a herd of dinotheres, elephants with inverted tusks. Never a threat to man when he was not a threat to them. The expedition had now attained one of its goals. There was a wealth of new information about early humans. They seem to have much in common with us. If we strip ourselves of cars, buildings, and credit cards, who are we after all? Above all, we're opportunists. Here, an oryx has been hamstrung by a lion and is unable to move. We found it this morning. Without tools to kill it quickly, we wait for it to weaken. For millions of years, we have been quick to take every available opportunity. When there was no freshly killed meat, there were edible wild roots to be dug up. We never limited ourselves to one kind of food alone. We were gatherers as much as meat eaters. This double strategy was made possible by our large brain. Along the shores of Lake Turkana, the scene of our infancy, our presence affected all other forms of life. We developed first not as killers, that would come many years later, but as ingenious competitors. Compared with most of the other creatures of the world, we are weaklings, but we know how to outwit them. It now seemed probable that modern humans, stripped of their technology, are just an arm's length from the first true people. The expedition had found some answers and raised many new questions. In throwing fresh light on human ancestry, it had achieved its aim. Then further discoveries, both here and in Ethiopia and Tanzania, advanced knowledge still further. One great surprise came on October the 10th, 1973, when Kamoya found human skull fragments in a previously unexplored area to the south of the camp. Richard and Meave immediately set to work to reconstruct the fossil in the field. The skull, scattered over a small area, wasn't in too many pieces. For a change, it had a full set of teeth, one of its most interesting features. They were small and light, belonging to a human with a small brain. Until now, such a combination of features had never been found at the lake. This skull could be dated at between 2 and 2.5 million years. It was neither one of the southern apes, nor was it like the famous 1470. It seemed to be a new human type. If it were, the truth about human origins would be more complex, with at least 3 kinds of human, not 2, living side by side.
Richard, I think you and I both agree that this new skull doesn't really go either in this line or in the other line, and we have to make a third one.
Well, if we're going to do
Because of this growing complexity, the complete collection of priceless Lake Turkana fossils were laid out on a table in search of a clue that might have been overlooked.
But if we haven't got 2 lines, then clearly we've got 3.
That's right.
If we've got 3, I think we've got to rethink some of these fragments. For example, if we accept that as an example of a third type, then I think things like this come into question. And I think we'd have to put that in the middle.
Because of the size of the teeth.
We'd have to put that in the middle. This is another one.
I think this, which we thought was a small
very probably.
female.
I would put this one on that side because I think it's suggested, although it's more complicated.
Since Richard Leakey's pioneering work, the study of human origins has advanced a long way. New techniques of dating show that humans spread from Africa to Asia about 1 million years earlier than had been thought. But this didn't re-establish the old theory of an Asian origin for our species. Asia has no parallel to Leakey's finds in Africa, no signs of human forebears. His work in 1970 remains the foundation for an eventual understanding of where we came from.
Within this entire collection, the answer to our ancestry is here.
The search for the earliest humans may never end. As one clue leads to another, and as more information comes to light, it reveals how much still remains undiscovered. This ancient, arid land gives very little, but the little it does give is priceless. Not all its treasures are fossils and tools. Another is a sense of kinship that reaches back 3 million years.
Keepers of the Kingdoms returns in 3 weeks' time on Saturday, the 18th of March.